Welcome to Topline.
Welcome,
Sam. You're in vacation mode.
I am in vacation mode. Doesn't matter. The emails don't stop. The Slacks don't stop. The
Topline sure doesn't
never
stop.
stops.
It never, ever. We can't miss a week. We can't miss a week. So I care about you little devils, you little so's and so's.
This Slack is quite intense. Like, it is really overwhelming. Whenever I log in, it gives me anxiety. I don't know how you guys do it.
Have you guys ever felt like, oh, I have all of my priorities done? Like I check off everything, but you have an inbox or Slacks that are just weighing over your head, and that's the only thing.
Like that. I have never felt like that. They've been like, I'm done.
I had such a fulfilling week, but I still felt like overwhelming dread because of my inbox. How stupid is that?
I feel overwhelming dread because of my sheer laziness. I'm just so incredibly lazy. I let things drift. Most of the way that I respond to people is I'm in the shower. I'm like, oh, I should write back to that person. That's my system. That's my system. So
that's not a good system, Sam.
No, it's very bad. And my results are clearly a function of
like in the shower,
lack of discipline. Yeah. Oh, wait a minute.
By the time you're done and you're out of the shower,
I always remember that one person though, but it's always like 2 weeks later. It's like, hey, sorry, but I'm writing you back now.
I send a lot of notes to myself from the shower using Siri. Like, I'll turn the shower off. I'll be like, Siri, note to self. And then
that's good. I like that.
Yeah.
Why aren't you using ChatGPT for that? I feel like that's a great use case for ChatGPT. No?
What's that?
Why does ChatGPT need to remind me of things? Siri is good enough for reminders.
You could write the email and have the email written in a great way.
I'm looking to continue with my nice warm shower.
Welcome to Topline, the podcast for the best founders, operators, and investors in B2B tech. Every week, AJ Bruno, Asad Zaman, and me, Sam Jacobs, will break down what's important for you to know to be the most well-informed professionals in the market.
If you're looking to revolutionize your account-based strategy, then look no further than Terminus. Taking a unified approach to ABM, Terminus offers an all-in-one platform to streamline your sales and marketing efforts, enhance customer engagement, and drive real results. With features like advanced targeting, robust analytics, and seamless integrations, Terminus empowers your team to work smarter, not harder. Don't miss out on the future of unified go-to-market. Visit terminus.com today and take your go-to-market strategy to the next level.
Asad, let's be real. You wash your phone every day, literally. Let's bring this up right now. How many of our listeners wash their phone? Asad washes his phone.
I met someone recently that the first thing you do when you enter their apartment is you have to take off your shoes, wash your hands, and wash your phone.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that's a thing.
Do you wash it under a faucet? What do you mean wash your phone?
Antibacterial wipes. You got to get antibacterial wipes.
No. Asad puts it under the faucet.
I used to put it under the faucet.
That's very weird. I mean,
because I read that it's waterproof. I was like, let's see. And then I did it and it looked so nice and clean. I was like, this is fantastic. Look at all this dirt. It's no longer on my phone. And I just did it every day for a year. And I was like, the speakerphone doesn't work as well anymore.
Yeah.
So I stopped.
All right. What's happening in the world? Let's get started.
Sam has beaches to be at right now.
No,
he needs to get it going.
I've got a long travel. I got a travel evening ahead of me. I'm driving to Dover, Delaware this evening from North Carolina.
How long?
Dover? Are you watching a NASCAR race? What are you doing in Dover?
Dover is a good amount of distance to New York so that I can wake up tomorrow morning and have a shorter drive to New York so that I can still get out to my guys' weekend and not have to be in the car because the drive down here. So Delta canceled my flight because of CrowdStrike. And it ended up being a 9-hour drive from New York, which is
Delta is struggling right now. They're in the struggle bus.
They really are. They're in it with CrowdStrike. They were a Microsoft shop apparently.
So thousands of flights were canceled. Here's some data on this. So 8.5 million Microsoft Windows devices were impacted by this CrowdStrike update. CrowdStrike likes to say that it requires minimal oversight, and then this happens. And so the impact of this is that every device just keeps restarting itself. So you can't remotely fix it because the device is just constantly restarting. So a human has to go and manually fix this. And it only takes 10 minutes or so to fix one device. But if you look at all the devices, Ryan Burke posted this in our Topline Slack. It would take a total of 750 to 1,500 human years worth of work to fix all these devices. Isn't that wild?
That is insane.
And so the impact of this is CrowdStrike lost 19 billion in market cap. To contextualize that, that's the GDP of Iceland or the yearly budget for Boston as a city. So it's significant. How do you guys, the thing I was thinking about is for our slice of the world, the early and growth stage side of the world, you don't have these type of massive falls, but you have falls that to you feel intense when they play out. How do you manage a situation like this? Sam, have you ever dealt with, our version of this type of a problem where somebody released something and it broke or anything of that sort?
I think AJ probably has more experience with it. The worst thing that ever happened to me was that Carly slurped all the emails from all of our personal email inboxes when we sent out an email saying we were changing our name from Revenue Collective to Pavilion. And I got an email back from this person, and I'm like, who is that person? Because all it said in response to this announcement was, go F yourself. I can't believe you would ever send this to me. And I was like, who is that? And then I remembered, it's the sister of my ex-wife. And I realized that we had uploaded all of my personal email addresses, and somehow they'd really focused on, deliverability and open rates were very high with my ex-wife's family. And that wasn't great. So then I said, hey, Carly, never again can we send any emails to that person. Anyway, but, AJ, what about you? You ever had anything like that happen?
I have a great story about this. So TrendKite was a searchable database of news articles. We had 1 million articles you could search. And back in 2012, search was still a technology that was in its infancy. AWS had just rolled out their own search technology that we were using. We switched to Apache Solr. And long story short is everyone expected search to act as fast as Google. Google was the flag bearer, of course. And if it didn't operate performance-wise as fast as Google, you were nothing. So if you're searching a database and it took longer than 3 milliseconds, people were ticked off. So to combat this, we were switching to Elasticsearch. Elastic was the gold standard, still is a gold standard, really.
This is Andrea's company, Elastic?
Elasticsearch is not Andrea's company.
No, Elasticsearch is a framework that, to AJ's point, is super popular. Yeah.
It's an architecture that everyone uses for searching a big database. So we were switching from this Apache Solr, but I was showing off, as a founder does, showing off the technology of how cool and how fast this was. And I had an advisor or an investor in the office one day, and this is in 2013. And so I'm sitting there and I'm showing them how to search for different names. And I'm like, this thing is so cool. I can search for the word the, and it will be perfect. So I type in THE and hit enter. And it was the master command center alarm gone off on all computers across it. So we had this thing called nodes on AWS, which are basically nodes are your platform running. And if those shut down, you are SOL, you are in big time trouble. We had 9 nodes, 8 of them went down.
Just because you typed in THE?
THE, because I typed in the. Yeah, and
did it return too many results? So it overloaded.
It just destroyed everything. And so the Apache Solr was going down. We were going to migrate. We were supposed to migrate to Elastic in 2 months. We had to do it in a weekend because of this.
Oh wow!
And so our entire engineering team, and Steve Vaughn, if you're out there, shout out to you. You spent the entire weekend fixing a stupid co-founder's mistake. Now, the truth of the matter is, I was just a user. It wasn't my fault that I typed
any user could have done that.
Anyone could have done that, and so that almost brought down the whole system. And so that story lives in infamy for sure. If you ask anyone who was at TrendKite in 2014, and they will tell you the story of
who are you demoing it to?
I don't even remember. Someone I was interviewing, I think, and they didn't take the job. But on CrowdStrike, so funny story. I had a red eye from San Francisco to Philadelphia. Flight left at 10:30 p.m. and we back out of the gate. And the pilot comes on and says, "Hey, American Systems, we just went down. It's probably just like a 10-minute delay, not a big deal." And so we start taxiing to the runway, and we stop. And an hour goes by. I kind of like pass out because it's a red eye. I'm like, I need to sleep. I have 10 meetings back to back starting at 8:30 a.m. on the East Coast time. I had a big week last week, but it culminated in making sure that I was going to be ready for these meetings. And when I landed, and so I go to sleep, I wake up to an announcement saying, "Hey, it's still down. Apparently Microsoft Outlook there was a push release to Microsoft Outlook, and that's to blame, and it's brought down all systems across all airlines." And so I was like, what is he talking about? So I Google and I find the Reddit thread that is all the IT directors that are like, oh boy, we're going to be in for a real bad day tomorrow.
They knew.
They knew.
And
they knew.
That guy just branded it a Microsoft problem, but it was nothing about Microsoft. It was a CrowdStrike problem, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting how much Microsoft's brand has run hit during this. When your thing happened at Trendkite, how do you rally a team around a situation like that? Like, how do you get people to work the way they need to work and be in the right mind frame? Like, any insight from that?
I go back to what Sam has said in the past, like, mission critical. Yeah, Sam's intrigued. Sam has said the three of us aren't saving lives. We're not the mission critical life saving thing that we want us to be. We think we have like
changing lives.
We have great change. Yeah, we have great visionary of this, but at the end of the day, we aren't doing that. And so if it happens for us, I'm sorry, customers, and it does suck. It's like payroll is one of the things you don't want to mess with, so I try not to. But this is a little bit different because there were operating rooms that were like ready to go, and they had to push surgeries on this. So this is a really big deal. My friend who's a doctor, I messaged, he had to push 2 of his surgeries in the morning, Friday morning, and the flight was canceled, by the way, and I did have those 10 meetings. But I ended at 10 a.m. and had a great walk, 9-mile walk, seeing Coit Tower and the Fisherman's Wharf.
9-mile walk?
In San Francisco. San Francisco is beautiful, by the way. We're totally off topic. San Francisco...
Especially when you're on the Embarcadero and you're going by Golden Gate Park and all that stuff. It's beautiful.
It's gorgeous. Yeah. It's absolutely gorgeous these days. Okay. I will pause because I'm going off on tangents. I'm making up for last week because I didn't talk last week.
9-mile walk, that is a long walk. Were you taking the meetings on the walk?
No, I'd finished at 11:30. I finished all of my meetings. They were just 30-minute quick meetings that I had.
So are you listening to podcasts on the walk? Are you listening to music?
No, I was talking to Ryan. Ryan Milligan and I were chatting the whhole time about how we're going to take over the world next year. Quotapath's going to take over the world. We had it. Yeah, it was great.
Okay. One of the things that we want to talk about.
He says okay like that, it means he's not interested in any.
Switch this topic around.
Who gives a shoot about Coit Tower? Nobody cares.
I like that you've learned. You guys have learned my mannerisms.
Okay. What do you want to talk about, Asad?
I want to talk about executive teams because, I think it's so fascinating because when you are going through the company is evolving and there are 2 things that are happening. The market is constantly changing and then the company is evolving based on its growth, right? Like the infrastructure changes, the internal dynamics change, etc. And so you've got leaders that you've hired and some will grow with the organization. Some are better for one market versus the other type of market. So these leadership teams are really tricky because in any given moment, very few people have perfect leadership teams. And so the question that brings up is, how should a founder, CEO, even another high-level executive, how should they be looking at their executive teams to see if they've got the right people in the right seat? How much of it is about technical capability in that role versus kind of how they make you feel when you work with them. It's something that we've seen a lot of people discuss in our space. And so curious to get your thoughts, Sam. What are your thoughts on this general hairy problem?
I think it's a very hairy problem, Asid. And I don't know the answer. Here, there's a variety of different threads in my mind at any given time. One thread is, yes, you'll get somebody that says, you want somebody to give you the devil's advocate position, to give you the appropriate amount of pushback, to not just be a person that says yes all the time. And I think that that's true. And there needs to be constructive tension. And then at the same time, I've seen it in so many cases, including where I've been the one that's giving the constructive feedback, that at some point somebody tires of hearing the constructive feedback and playing the role of somebody that's always the nudge or the pain in the tush or the briar, the nettle, the little thorn in the side. You start to think, I can sort of push on this front as an executive because they trust me. And then you realize at some point that the trust has run thin and that the person is frustrated with you and that not getting along isn't a positive sign. It's a negative sign, or at least that's been my experience. And so, and then you have to, and then there's a bunch of other strands. And that's why I'm actually interested in what you think, Asa, because you build executive teams for other companies. But there's another strand where you're keenly aware that, yes, you're the CEO, and yes, you have the most job security in that conversation, but also you're not perfect either. And that you're probably contributing, and so that some part of it is a dynamic, and you're contributing to a negative dynamic, possibly through a lack of knowledge or a lack of expertise that you're bringing to bear. And then there's another thread, which is what's the altitude of the decision that you should be involved in? Because, we've talked about, part of the job of being a CEO or whatever, a leader, right, is like you bring in somebody and you let them run and you let them do their thing, and you have milestones and clear objectives, and you say, I'm holding you accountable to these outcomes. But then on the other hand, I've heard recently from a lot of different people, and it's sort of become my point of view, that no, that doesn't mean that they get to kind of do whatever they want, that you're allowed to say what you expect from the position, and you're allowed to be, as the boss, a little bit of a pain in the tush, that really the goal is to drive to outcomes, not necessarily always to create, the keenest sense of harmony. But then on the other hand, you're like, well, maybe I'm being a jerk, and maybe I'm not being like a helpful boss. And you're like, I don't want to be part of these people that swaps people in and out and views them interchangeably. And so then the question is like, well, how do you know exactly when, and how do you figure out, like, when are you the right person? And maybe you're contributing to this dynamic, and maybe this person could continue to develop or evolve if it wasn't for you standing in their way in some way. And I don't know where I come out of it, but I feel, but to the point, I think it's very, very hard. I think that I want to believe that people have huge upside, and that, if you give them the right resources. I also think, on the other hand, that there's this, you can tell that my thoughts are so scattered on this because I think it's a very complicated topic.
Yeah.
I also think that there's this other thing of like, well, let me design the job the right way. Maybe if I'm frustrated with that person, I'm asking them to do something that's not in their wheelhouse. And then there's two thoughts to that, because then you can say, well, the title is this, therefore they should be able to do those things. And it's not your job to rewrite job descriptions for somebody's lack of capability. But then on the other hand, you can say, that's all well in a perfect world, but we live in the real world. And in the real world, this person has a lot of assets and a lot of contribution and has a lot of things they're great at. And yeah, there's things that they're not great at. So maybe what I do is redesign the role for the things that they're great at. And maybe I support them in the things that they're not great at. And all of that comes down to like, and then, I saw, Harry Stebbings on Twitter or whatever, and you've got people, it's easy for me to say never worked at operating companies because, it's a low blow to him, but nevertheless, he's never worked at an operating company. And he's a professional investor with very strong points of view on what makes great managers, but hasn't really ever managed anybody. And that's okay. That doesn't mean you have to have done it to have a point of view on it. Pauline Kael never directed a movie, but she's one of the great movie critics of all time. But nevertheless, when Harry's like, hey, the founder that says, because he was literally talking about what we were talking about, the founder that says, I'm not focused on my competition. There's room for a lot of us to win. I'm just going to keep focused. That person loses. And then the person that says, I'm going to dominate the competition and take the market because this market is winner take most, that person wins, which is sort of a way of invoking some kind of like masculinity or toughness or something like that. I don't think strength is necessarily correlated to masculinity. For all the female listeners out there, I'm sorry for even implying that. But the point is like, so then you're like, maybe I'm not being tough enough. Maybe I just got to be a jerk and like fire more people. And I don't know where I come out on it is like, what are my values and how do I set this person up for the things that they're best at while not compromising my right to name the behavior that I want to see? That's where I come out of it. But so that's that. Now I'm playing pickleball and I hit the ball to my partner, AJ Bruno. AJ, you've got to have a lot of thoughts on this. What do you think, sir?
Oh, it's not like any of our companies don't listen to this podcast. Like,
I didn't say
waiting with bated breath for what we're going to say here.
I think these are themes. Right, we're not calling anybody specific out. And I also deal with lots of founders and CEOs all the time talking about this.
This is something that Asad's going to be suited well to answer. So I definitely want to hear his thoughts. But I think your point about this is a very multifaceted, complicated situation. We have different relationships with each of our management team members. You're right in saying that people were hired into a role. Do they meet that role? Did they get promoted into a new role? Were they brought in at the executive level or were they promoted into it and they're viewed differently from the company? I mean, I have a situation, and actually this is it's going really well, but our head of product, our senior director of product, Andy, is going to go start a company. He's going to be a phenomenal founder somewhere. And this was literally a conversation that's happened at the beginning of the year. He approached it and came up and said like, hey, I don't know if I've done what I can. I've taken it from 0 to 1. Like I need to like either take another step up or I'm going to go found a company. He's always been very forthright with that. And we just took a look at the org and the org structure and the design and ultimately together just said like, yeah, this is the right step for you. I'm going to support you and you're going to go start something great. You know, for us as an organization, as a team, we need something different and that's okay. But it's really hard to get to that point if you're feeling like you're fighting against the person with constructive feedback and they're not hearing you get to that point. And then the question is, Sam, what you're alluding to is like, are you a jerk by just calling it bluntly, calling a spade and saying this isn't a good fit? And that sucks to say it because then you feel like all of our management team, they're nice people, but like, that's not what we always need. And we have to be okay with saying that that's the case and saying that we need something different. And yeah,
do you think though, I assume by the way that the QuotaPath team knows about this news since you've just announced it on our podcast. Yeah. Okay. That's good. That gives me reassurance. But what about
this is how we get to be in the top 1%.
One day, just spilling the tea. What do you think about the idea of like, hey, maybe we as CEOs need to do a better job? Like, how do we know what's good? I mean, I sometimes, and the answer is like, well, I don't know how you know, but that's your job. So you get to have a point of view. That's just the way it works. But what do you think about like, well, maybe we need to find the right role for this person. Maybe we need to imagine the job description.
Yeah. Is it the right person, wrong seat? I think that's an actual easier exercise because you're like, feel like that they're immensely talented, but they're just like not excelling at where they are. And it's like, then the question is, do you have a seat open at your organization? And if you don't, then it should be okay to say like, it's the wrong bus and it's just timing. Like that's where I stand more firmly on the, like, it's okay to let talented people, if they're not excelling in their role, go. And it's not fun. My CEO from Trendkite actually said this really well. And by the way, Eric Huddleston's out there, but
I thought you were the CEO from Trendkite.
No, you don't know this story, Sam?
What? Serious?
We brought on I was never the CEO at Trendkite. I was founder and president of Trendkite. I ran all of growth. Matt Allison was the CEO.
You actually didn't know? You're just pulling his leg.
No, I didn't know. I thought he was the CEO.
My God, Sam. He's spoken about this a few times.
This has turned into Topline therapy right now.
Well, I'm just saying I did think he deserved to be CEO. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, AJ is the reason that the company was successful, if you ask me.
Oh, I love that. Okay, great. Perfect. You're such a great therapist, Sam. You made me feel
I feel like I've been a real shitty friend. Sorry for swearing, a bad friend. If I didn't know that you weren't. I thought you had that argument at the very beginning, and you went to your dad and you're like, hey, I might not be CEO. Like this might not work out. And your dad's like, listen, you'll figure it out. He doesn't know what the job of the CEO is going to be. And then I thought like at some point something shifted and then like that person was out and you became CEO.
Oh. No. Matt, so Matt was a CEO. That conversation that you just described absolutely happened just like that. And I ran the sales team's founder and president. And then when we hit our Series B,
hired a CEO.
It became clear. Correct. Yeah, we hired Eric Huddleston, and Eric always used to say that if you're having an argument with your management team member, CEO to management team member, there's only going to be one winner coming out of that room, which is the CEO.
That's
what his point of view was. It's debatable.
I think that's the first point that I made when I was talking, which is like you can only be the nudge for so long before somebody's like, you know what? This is annoying. I'd rather have somebody that agrees with me.
But he was right in the sense of like, how many times we know, Austin, we know people that have had arguments with the CEO and then they're out the next day.
Yes.
We both know, like, he's right. Eric is right to say that is true because, those people are surprised. They're surprised, right?
Yeah, but it's not such an absolute thing, right? Like I've had many debates with people that are on my team that I concede on. Like if I do think that there are situations where you're going to have to make a call on a thing and you as a CEO will make that call and the other person has to live with it, right? Like disagree but commit at the end of the day, whatever we decide we don't commit to. But I think a great CEO also has the wherewithal to say, if the logic is pointing in a direction that wasn't my original point, then I'm going to concede there because it's not about me being right. It's about doing the right thing. And I think this is where when you're designing your executive team, you need people that have the ability to communicate with you as the individual. So as you guys were talking, the thing that was coming to my mind was that you have to design an executive team around the CEO. It's subjective to the CEO. That is just the way it has. The CEO is ultimately responsible for this organization. They have strengths, they have weaknesses, they have quirks of character. And whoever you hire into that team has to be able to work with this person. And that
So Asad, are you then, when you're hiring executives, are you interviewing the CEO to figure out that profile and really crafting a job posting around the CEO for your for CROs?
Yeah.
Oh.
Because
that's interesting.
If the CRO is reporting in this instance to the CEO, which is in most early and growth stage businesses, it's going to be that way, right? Whereas like if you're 100 million plus, the CRO reports to the president, who's essentially the CRO, right? But for early and growth stage businesses where this person is reporting to the CEO, the most important thing is to see, can these two actually work well together? So you design different types of steps to test that viability. And so an example of that is, you have to have them do a whiteboarding session together. You have to have the CRO present something to this and tell the CEO, push on that person's points to see if you guys can actually collaborate. You have to send them to dinner so that they can have a glass or two of wine and see if they like each other. Like you have to test it in different ways, because if they can't work well together, then it's going to end badly. And the CEO is going to be replaced by the board, right? If the CEO can't deliver. Till that happens, you have to build around the CEO. I really believe.
Have you ever walked away from a CEO because of something they said?
Oh, sorry, what do you mean?
When you interview them, have you ever said this CEO isn't going to be, like, I'm not going to find the right person for them to work with?
No, because I'm not here to judge them. They can be quirky in whichever way. Like we'll find people that can work well with them. Like we've luckily never interacted with somebody who's racist or sexist or something like that. But in most cases, the quirks of character, I find them attractive. And I think it's really fun to treat it as a jigsaw puzzle where you're trying to figure out who is going to work well with this person in this role, with the dynamics of that role in mind, and then who's going to work well with them with a CMO type of role. which has very different dynamics. So I think the first thing is you have to design it subjectively around the CEO. And I think if people do that, you can navigate away from a lot of the problems that end up happening, because you're going to have conflict, meaning that there's going to be debate, and the people have to be such where they let logic win the discussion. And if you get the right people together, that can happen. The other part that seems interesting is it's easier to change a person's job early on in a career, right? Like if you're looking at the trajectory, and if you're looking at your org, manager, director level, you can design things in a way where, it feeds to their strengths and you hedge against the weaknesses. You can't do that at the C level, right? Like if the CMO is not behaving properly in that role, is no longer stage appropriate, etc., there's only so much time you have for them to grow into this new stage. I think the targets don't change. And so if the person hasn't been working on preparing themselves for the new stage the business is going to be in next year, and the skills they need to have and bring to the table to be an appropriate leader for that stage and the next stage, then you have to replace them. That's on the CMO to be able to look around the corner and say, this business will fundamentally shift. We're now going to be at a spot where instead of 20% of our budget going towards demand, 50% has to go towards instead of 20% going to brand, now 40 or 50% goes to brand. That is a very different situation. Let me prepare myself to be able to appropriately make those investments. If you're not prepared when the moment comes, I don't think companies then have to hold still for you to figure it out. Then you have to get fired and somebody else has to be brought in.
Is that your advice to Sam and I, though? Like, we're both talking about our C levels right now, and you're saying literally sit down and understand if the C levels are making the right investments for what's around the corner. We're having those conversations with them. We feel like we're giving the same advice and feedback.
I think it's more like the moment you're in. You make decisions on whether they stay or they go based on the moment you're in. Are they appropriate today, right? And if they are effective partners today, now the advice you can give them is this business won't be today's business 12 months from now. So make sure you're ready for that next stage. That I think has to be a culture in these organizations, which is, Shopify does this really well, which is the CEO says, every year I need to be a different CEO. I need to reapply for my job. And it's going to be a different job. So let me prepare for that. And it's
like Sandgren, who fired himself. He did a really good job.
No,
right?
Then he just said, I am the new CEO.
That's all BS.
That was a really annoying post.
No, the Shopify thing, it's all BS. It's total BS.
Sure, but like in theory, it makes a lot of sense.
Oh, sure, in theory, but he never gets fired. So it's like
maybe he's great and the company is doing well.
Yeah. Maybe he gets more lenience. Maybe he gets to have a bad year, and maybe an executive doesn't. Yeah, and maybe he has way more control, and there's this like brand that's imbued with Toby or whatever. I don't even think Toby's the CEO, right? Again,
yes, he is the CEO.
I just feel like people that are like, I have to reapply for my job every year. It's like, that's interesting because you've never, like, when were you worried about getting fired? Well, I mean, I'm not fired. I applied for my job and I was accepted every year uniformly, unanimously. Yeah, exactly. I've decided that I've leveled up, and I did a podcast. I did the Acquired podcast to support it, and people have written articles about me. So I'm a friggin' genius. I went to the All In Summit. I spoke at the All In Summit. Therefore, my application was accepted. It's like, get out of here. It's enough.
Well, I think, so the counter view on that would be that these businesses every 2-3 years are operationally very different beasts. And as long as with a publicly traded company, you can see their performance, right? So as long as the company is performing, you have to imagine that the people that are still there and have been there through these various stages, they have adjusted to the new stages really well, some by preparing in advance, others by adjusting in the moment. So the fact that Shopify has performed well means that, well, something's going well. And he's turned his exec team over a couple of times. Like, that exec team has not always been able to adjust to the new challenges, but he's been a good steward of capital. He's been I
agree.
Super fascinating.
I agree that he has been a good steward of capital. My fundamental point, I guess where I'm coming out on this, is that I'm defensive about feeling like there's all these pundits outside that are like, you have to be more ruthless. And so I hear that all the time. And I've been listening to the Founders podcast, and like everything's about how ruthless you need to be. And Rockefeller was ruthless, and Elon's ruthless, and Bezos is ruthless. And these people are just such ruthless bastards. And then I'm, and chips in pockets, but chips in shoulders, and unhappiness is good for shareholders and bad for your mental state. And if you're happy, you're a loser. And if you're like feeling peaceful or content, you're a loser. And why aren't you a winner? What's wrong with you? Why don't you want to win? The people that want to win, they work 90 hours a week. They burn every relationship they have, and they are ruthless bastards. But I'm not saying that as a bad thing. I'm saying it as a successful pundit that sits outside. I work 20 hours a week. I'm saying that you should work 90 hours a week. You should have failed relationships, and you should be unhappy. I'm just telling you as I see it, because I'm an allocator of capital and I built a podcast. It's like, I'm tired of it. Go away.
I feel like every single week we solve life's problems, and Sam
they're all mine. And they're all of us.
Are you ready to revolutionize the way your team goes to market? Join us from October 14th to 16th in Austin, Texas for GTM 2024, the premier B2B SaaS conference where the world's top go-to-market executives learn, plan, and execute strategies that fuel growth. Expect 3 days packed with interactive sessions and panels addressing top-of-mind challenges, hands-on planning and forecasting workshops for 2025, and of course, plenty of networking opportunities. Whether you come alone or bring your entire leadership team, you'll find valuable insights and dedicated time to prepare for the year ahead. And be sure to stick around Austin for GTM 2024 awards, celebrating the top leaders in our industry. Ready to get a line and get ahead? Visit joinpavilion.com/GTM 2024 and use the code Topline for 15% off your ticket. Details are in the show notes. Hope to see you in Austin.
What about, Sam, you were talking about something really interesting, which is redesigning the org. Like you even sent us this screenshot of this exercise you were doing. And it made me think of back in the day in football, soccer, there was this team in Holland called Ajax. And they invented this new style of playing football called total football.
Then Man U adopted it, or Man City did. One of them did.
No, Barca did. So the innovation was, instead of you being a player in a position, everybody has to be able to do various different things, and you would interchange amongst each other fluidly based on how the game is going. And what you were saying just reminded me of that. Can you tell us a little bit about your general thoughts on this? Different ways to design the company?
I feel like sometimes you get, there's a long, there's a long body of work around org chart design, and I don't know who proposed it the first time, but there's the idea that you start with the boxes, right? And you design the org chart in terms of the roles and responsibilities that are going to maximize the company's strengths, minimize the weaknesses, and drive towards the right outcome based on, some V2 MOM methodology of establishing the vision and the mission for the company and setting it on its North Star. And then you design the organization that's best designed to support that mission. And that's why the mission's so important, because the organization sits in service to the mission. So you got to know what the mission is and what the vision is, what's the world that you're trying to create. And then you have a list of names, and those are all the people that currently work at the company. And then you go about the process of putting names in boxes, and you're going to have, and ideally, you're going to have some boxes that don't have names, and that's who you need to hire, and some names that don't have boxes, and those are the people that shouldn't be at the organization anymore. And that got me thinking not about being ruthless again, about like figuring out who we don't want to have. But I had another conversation with somebody that said, you need to maximize for the strengths of the individual, and whatever their title is or whatever their role is in the organization, like don't worry about that. Don't worry about like how it's classically been designed and this person's responsible for this and that person's responsible for that. And instead think about what their unique strengths are. What are they really, really good at? And then just design a role around them. And then the answer to that is, but what if that's not the appropriate answer? And it's like, well, but why is it not the appropriate answer? Because you've said that these people, the team has a bunch of amazing strengths. So let's maximize those strengths. Let's not be ruthless and assume that because there's also, there's two things that humans suffer from. One is loss aversion, which is, this idea that you're in a difficult relationship and you can't imagine what a good relationship would be like. And that's partially true sometimes when you're in an executive, coworker relationship. But the other is, institutional knowledge. And like, you also don't know the hidden benefits of somebody that cares passionately, that's doing, that just happens to be great at certain things and not great at other things. And so then that's why I got to the point of like, what if we just looked at all of the different initiatives in the business and just assigned an owner to every single initiative? What if we just drove ownership all the way down, regardless of, who reports to who and what's the hierarchy and how does the pyramid look? But just say like, this is an important initiative. Okay, somebody in the organization needs to own it. I'm putting that person on it. I don't care what their title is. I don't care where they are in the hierarchy. I don't care who they report to. What I need to know is that they own this initiative. So when I say, how's this thing going? There's a person that has to answer for it. Regardless of like, again, the pyramid, the organizational pyramid that you've designed, regardless of whether it's like, well, we have this function and everything's supposed to roll up to that function, and that doesn't not logically go into that function. And so now we're not there yet, but that's sort of like what I'm trying to do is, instead of being like, it's not stage appropriate, I'm trying to say like, how do I take the group of people that are passionate and committed to building Pavilion that I currently work with, and how do I maximize their strengths and design an organization that's going to yield the most positive outcome, even if the way that we've designed up and divided up the roles and responsibilities doesn't look like a traditional organization.
AJ, when you hear that, you've been in organizations that have grown 100, 200% year over year. I really like what Sam is saying. And I think that's more in line with how I think about designing STA as well, is like trying to make this jigsaw puzzle work as much as humanly possible. And then if it just don't fit, fine, but you really want to try to get it to fit, right? You like the people you work with, you want to work with them, you want them to thrive, etc. Is it different when a company is growing at like 100, 200%? Like, is that the differentiator between if you try to make the jigsaw puzzle work versus you just have to be a little bit more ruthless about things like stage appropriateness? Because you've got venture capital, you have to grow at these rates, you've got investors barking at you and nipping at your ankles. And so in those instances, yes, the stage appropriateness and the more classical way of designing an org is going to be the way you go. And if you're kind of like Sam and me, you're going to run a profitable, efficient business, growing at good rates, but not at 200% a year, you get to be a little bit more humane and innovative and creative with how you design the org.
Sorry, I'm coming back from my silent retreat. It feels really good. 5-minute pause.
Oh my God.
Good meditation.
What was that guy's name? Kareem.
Really
it was Kareem. Great guy.
I think both of you, are spot on this. And I don't think it changes Asad for 200, 300%. I think where I've found the most value is not just like the jigsaw puzzle piece, but also people that are like willing to change how they're jigsaw puzzling into this, that they're leaning into it and saying, hey, I see this gap, I see this opportunity, I am going to own this. And I know I've given Ryan Milligan shout outs over the years, but he has done that in spades.
And Graham as well.
Graham as well. They've been firefighters. I would say, and what Milligan has done, Ryan has done really well, is said, look, I don't know sales. I haven't carried a bag. I want to learn, and I want to learn from you directly. Here's what I think I'm really well suited, and here's my expectations, and here's how I'm going to communicate. And guess what? He's crushed it.
By the way, that is really interesting, because one of the truths of the ecosystem used to be that to be a sales leader, you have to have been a salesperson, right? Like, it was almost like written in stone. Milligan kind of goes against it. Huh?
I've never been a salesperson.
What?
Nah.
You were never a salesperson, Sal?
You've never had a quota?
I mean, I had a quota as the chief revenue officer and VP of sales, but no.
Oh my gosh, so you just went straight into leadership from finance?
Yeah. I mean, I was running at GLG. I was keeping a spreadsheet of my own P&L. I thought I was the GM of this particular business unit. If you ask Alexander, he would not agree. I was never paid as the GM of that particular, although I was paid very well, so I'm not complaining at all. And then I rose up to become head of customer success. And then I moved to Axial, and I was head of supply side on a marketplace business. And then I was promoted to VP of sales.
Well then.
So I'm a Ryan Milligan kind of guy.
Yeah,
look at this. AJ was never the CEO of Trendkite. Sam's never actually been in a sales role before. It's all coming out on this
in
episode.
a sales role. That's not what I said. I said I never carried a bag.
That's very
No, I heard what I heard.
But sorry, I cut you, AJ. Go on.
No, I think, but like Mark Roberge, also similar situation, was never a classic seller. I think you like people that really lean into the role in like problem solvers and figuring it out and trying to say, I'm going to support the CEO and like just do the thing that needs to get done are the people that you want to have on your management team and people you want to have in your org, frankly. And it's really tough to find those people. We've all come across them. We've all had them. We've all had people. And not everyone is always going to be like that. It's really, really difficult to find someone that can do that over a very long, sustained time. And that's where I think we run into challenges because we create these relationships over 3, 4, 5, 10 years even. And then at some point it's like, okay, that has run out.
Because there are two elements to that. Because one is you have this vision for your career, so you think you have to do A, B, C, D, E, F to go up in your career. So it feels quirky and weird when somebody is like, do this other thing. So there's some people that are hesitant themselves. The other one is it's quite exhausting to keep like switching and learning something new. And, they want to build and compound the learnings in this one direction, and flipping around sometimes is very overwhelming.
Yeah, in a 200 to 400% growing year over year company, you don't have the patience or the time to that. That's the major difference, is that people need to up-level themselves in fast succession, and that is tough. And so you're going to see organizations in those times, and this is probably happening in companies, probably even happening at Clay, happening at OpenAI, happening in all these fast-growing companies where the management team is flipping over like a year over year because it's having to reinvent itself.
I'll tell you what I think is. Can I say what I think is interesting? Yeah. I think what's interesting is that it's me. There's a guy named Dan Lee that was at Axial, Dan Brown, who's now a CRO, all these people, and it's Ryan Milligan, it's Graham. I'm sure it's people that you work with, Asid. In fact, it's you, Asid, right? And what is it? It's this thing of you bring somebody in that's just clay, but you know that they have massive, or you don't even know that they have massive upside. You just like them. Maybe you just like them. But something about them being there at an early stage and then seeing what's possible and then their own entrepreneurial spirit and curiosity creates this massive upside for them. And all of a sudden they're Cole or they're AJ or they're Ryan Milligan, right? And they're the VP of sales. And you look at the background and the narrative, and it doesn't fit neatly into your storyline. And you think, okay, that's interesting. And then you go out to hire the next role. And now that you're at a certain size or scale, you've got this minimum set of expectations. You're like, well, you need to have 5 to 7 years of experience in this. And let me look at their LinkedIn and let me make sure that their resume lines up. And hey, Asid, what do you think about this person's resume? And do you think that they're going to be a good fit for this job? And what you think you're doing when you do that, what you think you're doing is that you're raising the floor. And what you don't understand that you're actually doing is lowering the ceiling as well. Yeah. And what you're doing is just narrowing the aperture, but you're removing just as much upside as you are downside. And the reason that all these companies are like, how do I find a Ryan Milligan again? It's like, well, you're never going to find a Ryan Milligan again because you're not willing to take a huge chance on a completely unproven person. The organization just isn't at that place anymore. So you have this risk aversion that's natural, but it's like, yeah, so I'm going to have to take less than Ryan Milligan. The next VP of sales for HubSpot, for whatever happens to Ryan Milligan, is not going to be as good as Ryan Milligan. And that's a bummer. Or maybe not.
The counter argument to that, I think there's a counter argument to that, which is Andrea. Andrea, I've never worked with Andrea. Sam, you've worked with her the closest. She's CRO. I don't think she's ever been a CRO previously.
No.
But
she was a CRO team pay.
But I think she raised both the floor and the ceiling. Like you can just tell she's the type of person that like you join a company and she's like, oh my goodness, she's just going to like go fix things. She's absolutely doesn't care. Is going to make sure it gets done and just make the CEO look good.
I think the thing that stands out is that at certain points in your company's journey, you have to make hires where you're minimizing risk, knowing that the trade-off is the upside, right? So it's like, there's certain situations where you have to do that. Maybe you're growing at a pace where you can't take these big bets on people, and you have to hire stage appropriate people with some classical experience that makes them ramp up very quickly in that role. Maybe you're replacing somebody who is really important in that position, and you don't want to take a big bet because big bets can either work out really well or really badly, and you can't afford that. So it's case by case a little bit when you're hiring as to, am I going for the big bet or am I going for a risk managed hire? Which one is more appropriate in this instance?
Actually, we had this argument a couple of weeks ago. We literally had this argument about a candidate who I was looking at for a certain role, and they hadn't been leading that department, that type of department, in quite some time. They'd actually moved over and were handling like a different department. And you said, no, stay away from that person because that's not a typical thing. And I actually went the opposite way. I was like, I actually like the way that this person's journey and evolution of like they've taken on these different things, because to me it speaks that the CEO is saying you can go take these on, but you had the opposite opinion.
I said you have to ask that question now, right? Like you have to look at this and say it's quirky. It could be really interesting. Let's dig into it. To me, it's quirky optically and raises questions, but all of that is to say you go ask the questions and figure out what you want to do from there. But I like what you did because it's unconventional and a bet. Like you made a bet on a person because it wasn't a clean line.
Yeah.
Right.
And what I did was I had dinner with this person, and I also had Ryan Milligan meet them in person as well. Because what you do is you take the people that you think are your all-stars and you like ultimately say, is this person like going to first team and work well? And are they like, if they're talking to each other, are they able to like bounce, and like what does their conversation sound like, and what are they doing when I'm not in the conversation?
Okay. I'm gonna take over. I'm gonna you. I'm serious. I got okay. I'm going okay. I'm going next. All right. I have a question. So here's what we're talking about. We're talking about in the profitable, efficient growth world, new multiples on recurring revenue businesses. But has the rate of company formation changed? Are people starting fewer or more companies? Are there more entrepreneurs in general or less? And here's what, because I know that AJ said he wouldn't start a software business right now, but here's what I have to say. So today, as we're recording this, I announced on LinkedIn that I'm advising this company that I've mentioned a few times, Fixer.ai, started by Richie and Arch Hollingsworth. And it's this AI-enabled kind of personal productivity tool, also built for sales teams. I'm not going to give the sales pitch, but I am going to say that's only one in so many different. Now, maybe it's because I've become more influential. I don't know. But I'm telling you that it seems to me that there are more and more people. Like, I feel like we talk about these trends that may or may not be true, which is AI, co-pilots. They should lower no-code tools like Bubble or even Clay, right? They should lower the cost and the bar, whatever you want to say, the friction point that's required for starting a new company. So we'll see if more people are starting new companies. And coupled with, yes, it's a good economy in the rest of the world, but in tech, there's still some tightness in the labor market. Now, the tightness seems to be loosening, and Asad is bullish on STA, but also they're run by a very talented CEO, so they're going to do well regardless. Very handsome CEO. He's a very sweet CEO, and he's got delicious cheeks that I just want to give a little bite to. I want to bite those cheeks. You're a good boy. He's a very good boy. But anyway, my point is, do we think that more people or fewer people are starting companies these days? Because I'm just getting pinged all the time from people, non-technical people or people that have the appearance of being non-technical, launching new businesses. And it's really cool. And I even think some of the people on this call are thinking about launching some new businesses. They don't have to be all venture businesses. But I also feel like, whether it's Pavilion or not, that communities themselves in many ways are like a different kind of YC. They're a different kind of Techstars. They're like a different kind of platform, especially if they're purpose built communities like Operators Guild for Finance and Operations, Pavilion for Go-to-Market. You can use a community as an informal accelerator upon which you can build new relationships, you can find co-founders, and you can also imbue your startup with the principles and validate it within the community itself, who might be potential customers or users, even if they're not advisors. I don't know. Are you guys seeing the same thing? I just think it's really interesting because I even got an email in my inbox at the top of it today from a guy that's been a long-time Pavilion member who is a CRO, who's been in heads of sales at all these different, and the title is launching a company. And I just think that's cool.
He's not a Topline listener because he's not taking my advice. Apparently.
Or maybe he's not. Maybe when you say it, you're saying I wouldn't start a venture capital backed software business.
True.
Maybe there's an opportunity to build a different kind of software business. What do you think, Asid?
I think so. I think we looked at Yelp data a little while back, and it showed more new businesses had been created, and the rate had increased year over year. I forget exactly when we had gone through it, but it had shown the trend that people were expecting, which is that in downturns, more businesses get created. And more businesses get created because people lose their jobs. And so then they're like, okay, I'll go start something of my own. And every year, over the last 30, 40 years, every year, it's easier to start a business than the year before. That's just that's the trend in the world. And so they create businesses. And then now I think what will happen is with AI, you see the creation of a business becoming a little bit easier. And then in the coming quarters, or maybe in the next year and a half, once more liquidity comes back into the system, you'll also have a wave of entrepreneurship that's driven by that, because you have people that exit with some money and they go and become founders, or they keep the money and they stay in their jobs, but they become angel investors, and that's good for business creation. So I think there are some positive tailwinds for all of this. I see it in people that reach out to me to try to validate product ideas. I get a lot of those emails, which is like, hey, I have an idea. Can you help break it apart? For some reason, people think I'm just going to be good at breaking these ideas. I get a lot of those notes. I get a lot of them on Slack, the Pavilion Slack. Maybe once a week I get somebody reaching out.
And that's so cool.
It's really interesting, right? That's why I said validate, because they just come into me, they're like, just break it apart. Tell me why it won't work. And I think that's fascinating. I do think that it is interesting to see that more and more companies without super technical people that have the ability, you can envision this company generating many millions of dollars in revenue. So this isn't I can't see it past $1 million here. You can see this becoming a bigger business, but it's tech enabled more than super unique IP. And they're not necessarily, they don't have a lot of technical know-how internally. I find that fascinating. So that's what I'm seeing. I don't know what to make of it. AJ, what do you think?
I mean, I got a couple data points on my end, and because I have a couple data points, I'm going to say that's definitely the answer. But there's the post-exit founders. There's a channel, and I've been a member for a year and a half. I've never really looked at it, but I have noticed on a daily basis the uptick in the number of opportunities that have just probably gone from 2 to 3 to probably 5 to 10 a day, just hitting this in rapid succession.
How many people are in this group?
I don't know. I'm not a very active member.
Roughly,
as you
do they know that you aren't the CEO?
I'm going on another silent retreat during this episode.
Okay, continue. That was really interesting. So you're seeing 4 or 5 people a day saying, I'm starting something new.
Yes. And then I talked to this guy earlier today who he has his own podcast on YC. He runs a fund called Lobster Capital, and he only invests in YC companies. And Gabriel is his name. And I was talking to Gabriel about he started this in 2019, and he's had success. I don't know how many dozens of companies. It was started as a syndicate fund, and now it's a real fund. And we were talking about this, and I was like, oh, well, the YC is up to 150. He's like, no, it's up to 250 companies in each cohort. And there's 2 cohorts a year.
500 companies, all of them at 25 million post.
YC, no, it's gone up to 30 million posts. The seed is now at a 30 million post.
Seed at 30 million.
Yeah.
Oof. I'm sure the math works. So, no, I'm serious. I'm not kidding. On a portfolio basis,
it works at a fund level.
On a fund level, on a basket of those companies. Yeah, I'm sure it's like a killer. It's like a huge. What a good business.
What's a better feeding system than YC? It's like the world's best. But at the individual level, at the atomic unit, it's super scary because it really means you've got to execute perfectly to go raise your A, right? For the A to make sense. It's high pressure.
This goes back to like thinking about if you're investing at the seed, you're investing for founders that are like either going to go big or go home. And we've all heard this over the years. I think there are a lot more founders that are willing to take big bets and go big and go home today because of AI. But these companies that Sam's talking about are all really super interesting, and they're all probably going to see some level of scale and success. What end? What does that look like? What does an outcome look like if you're advising one of those companies, Sam? What are you looking for? What return are you solving for in that instance?
It's interesting. I'm solving for. Honestly, I'm solving for. I'm not really doing it for equity. I'm doing it because it puts me in conversations that I wouldn't otherwise be in. It puts me in fundraising conversations. It puts me in pricing conversations. It connects me to the market. And what I'm trying to do is
you're learning.
Yeah, I'm learning. And to the point of the question, AJ, I'm super interested. Again, I don't have a fund, so I don't even care if the math works. Like, I am aware that the math on what I'm about to say probably doesn't work. I'm interested in Pavilion can be a launch pad for a bunch of businesses that get to 5 to 10 million in some kind of revenue, even if it's not recurring, and get to 15, 20 million in enterprise value. And if this can become a place that you can do that and potentially skip 1 or 2 rounds of potentially venture funding and just see a lot of like effectively lower middle market to middle market type exits where you can build something that's worth 20 or 30 million and sell it on to somebody bigger. I think that makes Pavilion so valuable as a community. That's what I'm interested in developing. Just like creating the tools and the platform that enable people to like it's YC but not for venture. What if there's like Pavilion is a kind of YC for go-to-market and for go-to-market focused founders as well, like people building technology for sales and marketing. They can come here, they have the customers, they have the advisors, they have the resources, they have the access. And what if we can help, and what if they can build really cool new stuff? What if this can be the launch pad for the next Apollo? Or, anyway, that's why I'm doing it, because I think it's like a really...
You heard it here first, folks. Sam's launching a fund. Here it is.
That's a fund that I have no carry in, no economic interest in, but...
AJ was the CEO of Trendkite. Yeah. Sam's launching a fund. He was never a seller ever.
We learned a lot this episode.
All breaking news all day long.
All right. It's time for shout-outs and wins of the week. Who knows what they want to go with? AJ, you had a great week last week, so I'm going to call on you. Tell us about...
I'm going to give a shout out early in the week. So I had a great day in the HubSpot office on Monday, and have fantastic hosts with Alex Richard Newton, Marina Barasom. I'm going to hopefully pronounce her last name correctly, and our CSM Patrick Shelley. So my shout out goes to those HubSpotters that were just great hosts and making sure, and we were alive and well in the HubSpot office, enjoying their popcorn that they have.
Good job,
and HubSpot. Beer at happy hour.
How often are the HubSpot folks in office? Is it like remote with an office, hybrid? Like,
it's not often. It was
that sounded like a very empty office.
Yeah, Tuesday was there was a decent amount of energy. We had a board meeting Tuesday. Wednesday was in San Francisco, customer meetings. Second shout out. I already did the shout out for Simon last week. So no, we're good. Yeah. So I'm only sticking to that shout out to the HubSpotters.
Sounds good.
Mine's a quick one. There's another quiet episode out. So there was the Microsoft episode that they did a little while ago, but Microsoft is such a large, meaningful, and intense business that for the first time, they decided to do it over 2 4-hour episodes. So 8 hours on purely Microsoft, and they dropped the second episode, which basically is kind of Internet Explorer onwards, which is the Microsoft that I knew of, right? Like the Microsoft that was in the fight with Martin Andreessen over Netscape, and the one that went through all the legal battles and then floundered for a while, is that even a word, and then became the Microsoft that we know today. And I've gone through about an hour or two of it, and it's just fascinating. I've come out of it with so much more respect for Steve Ballmer, because the Ballmer I knew was the guy who you see on YouTube videos sweating profusely, streaming things like a lunatic. This guy built the enterprise business for Microsoft. This guy kept them together when Bill Gates was under all that pressure with the antitrust stuff. He was like the glue internally. Like, he was exceptional. I totally had him as a lunatic in my mind. So a great episode so far, and shout out to them. People should go listen to it.
Love that. I'm going to give a shout out to, obviously Fixer.aa, Archie and Richard Hollingsworth, but also I'm reading this book, Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. It's one of the 100 best books of the 21st century. It's about, it's very famous. It's part of a trilogy, and it's about Thomas Cromwell, who was a blacksmith's son that rose up to be the advisor and, a bunch of other titles to Henry VIII. And this particular book is about him helping Henry VIII negotiate and ultimately sever his ties with the Catholic Church so that he could marry Anne Boleyn. And it's about some of the things that we were talking about. It's about when do you lean into being the contrarian? When do you placate the person? How do you maintain your position as the number one giver of advice? And what a dangerous place that is to be for a mercurial leader like Henry VIII, who one day might favor you as long as you're getting the results, and one day might decide that you're not the person for him. So that's one shout out. Second shout out, Joe Biden. Thank you for not running for re-election. And that's what I'll say about that. I have other thoughts, but this isn't a political podcast. But I do want to thank Joe Biden for stepping aside. Can I ask you a
question?
Yeah, sure. Any question you want. Yeah.
There is an element of like politics and business, right? Like that intersection is an interesting intersection, because like there is a lot happening in the tech ecosystem. Like, why are all these people flipping over to the right? There's a lot that we should consider, like what the overlap is that made sense for us to think about and talk about, because there is an overlap, and it has a lot to do with taxes. There isn't another
podcast out there that hasn't spoken anything politically that we reference from time to time, right, guys? There isn't another podcast out there that does that.
Fair.
I think our insights on politics are so unique. The world needs to hear what we have to say. It's been another great episode of Topline. Go ahead, Austin.
No, I was saying what no one is covering is like these tax reasons why so many of these people are shifting to the other. Like, there's this nuanced stuff that's very businessy that no one touches.
Is the fact that rich people are in favor of lower taxes, is that nuanced?
Well, the unrealized capital gain stats that was proposed is a big reason why you have some VCs that have shifted allegiances, and it's very fair. Like that's a ridiculous stats.
I agree with that. Yeah. All right. It's been another great episode of Topline. Our resident bleeding heart liberal has zipped his lips closed, and as a
I know, I'm on another silent retreat, Sam. I went on a silent retreat again. Come on.
Every time I go on a silent retreat every time I go to sleep. We're going to talk to you on Thursday for Topline Hotline. Thanks for listening, everybody.
This episode was brought to you by AirCall, the business communications intelligence platform. Deliver a better experience for your customers and your teams at AirCall. That's AIRCALL.io. Save time, save money, and improve performance with a single communications platform.
Thanks for listening to Topline. New episodes come out every Sunday. If you like what you heard today, subscribe so you never miss an episode, leave a 5-star review, and share it with your friends. Don't forget to join our Topline Slack channel to connect with us and discuss the topics we cover with other listeners. Click the link in the show notes. Lastly, if you're interested in joining Pavilion, you can learn more about membership at joinpavilion.com/membership. Thanks again for listening.